This is day 2 of week 4 of Moses' excuses, focusing on the fourth excuse, I'm just not good enough. Moses might have been thinking that he was not experienced enough to do what God was asking him to do. Although he had grown up in Pharaoh's household as the adopted son of Pharaoh's daughter, and although history records him leading troops in battle to defeat the Ethiopians, for the last 40 years, he had been taking care of sheep. It was not possible for Moses to feel ready to accomplish the mission to which the Lord was calling him. He had 4 decades of life experience in a small tribal area, living with his wife and sons, taking care of his father-in-law's sheep. But life is filled with moments where you must step beyond your experience. If you have to have experience before you could do anything, then babies would never roll over. Toddlers would never learn to walk or talk. Kids would never go off to their first day of school, and no one would ever be a parent. The experience comes from the doing, not the other way around. And Moses was forgetting one vitally important fact. God was not asking Moses if he felt up to the task. God was telling Moses that he would see Moses through. Certainly Moses had some skills that God had already given him, but the point was not how great Moses could be, but how awesome God already was and always will be. God was going to do something miraculous, such as has never happened before or since in all of human history. God was going to use Moses in ways beyond his biggest dreams. Moses' skills and abilities were very nearly insignificant because God would prove himself to be mighty on Moses' behalf. As Zechariah recorded, "It is not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord of hosts," in Zechariah 4:6. So what about you? Do you think you're not good enough? In Genesis, we read of a man named Noah who had no experience building a ship, yet God used him to save and perpetuate the human race in the days of the flood. If you wait until you have experience, you will just keep waiting. While I was in the Marine Corps, I surrendered to preach. After I got out in 1981, Kathy and I spent 2 years at the university while serving in our home church. Then we moved off to go to Bible school. During our junior or senior year, I don't remember which, our home pastor came out and visited with us. He attended the same school in the 1950s, so it was like reunion week for him. A classmate from those days came up and talked to him for a while. Finally, Pastor asked him what he was doing. The man's response, "I'm just waiting on the Lord, just waiting on the Lord." After a few minutes, the man left, and while Pastor and I were walking away, he turned to me and said, "Terry, that man has been waiting on the Lord for over 30 years. When you get through with school, get out there and do something." If you wait until you have experience, you will just keep waiting. Instead, trust God and move forward with Him and for Him. Take the step of faith. Remember in Matthew 14, when Peter was in the ship and realized it was Jesus walking toward them on the water? Even though Jesus had to rescue him when Peter started sinking, Peter stepped out of the boat and walked on water too. Nothing in his life experience prepared Peter for that moment. His heart was stirred, the Lord said, "Come," and out he went. Don't you wonder what that felt like? I had an aunt and uncle who were water skiing champions. They could do flips and all kinds of things. It seemed like they could practically dance on the water, but not without their water skis. Peter just stepped out of the boat and walked on water. God said, "Come," to Moses too. But instead of stepping out, Moses said, "I'm just not good enough." So how do you respond when the Spirit of God stirs your heart to do something for Him? Action step number 1. Do you remember a time when you thought maybe God was leading you to do something? Did you hesitate? Or did you leap out of the boat? Sometimes I wonder how much we miss out on just waiting instead of immediately responding in faith. Action step number 2. Surveys compiled from across our country say that the fear of public speaking and the fear of failure are two of the most prominent fears within the American people. How could your fears hold you back from loving and serving the Lord? Action step number 3. If there were no obstacles, what would you most like to do to serve the Lord and minister to others? Now, how could you remove one or more of the obstacles? Action step number 4. We can learn from evaluating our experiences. I'm sure that when Moses was standing powerfully before Pharaoh and God was working mightily through him, if Moses looked back on that day in Exodus 4, he likely would have been embarrassed by his feeble excuses. What are the excuses you're using today that you would love to look back on and laugh at because you're choosing to move beyond it? As in the days of Isaiah, God is calling. Let's each answer, "Here am I, Lord, send me."